4-day split fixes all of those problems because you get to go to 2 squats a week, 2 deadlifts a week, 2 bench presses a week, and 2 presses a week. And because of the insane increase in efficiency, it gives us the opportunity to start adding supplemental and accessory work. You're listening to Barbell Logic, brought to you by Barbell Logic Online Coaching, where each week we take a systematic walk through strength training and the refining power of voluntary hardship.
Welcome back to Barbell Logic. This is your producer, Trent, and welcome back to another episode of the MED Masterclass. This is number 3. In the first MED Masterclass, we talked about the theoretical basis of MED programming, why it matters, what the heck is minimum effective dose, and why do we care. In last week's minimum effective dose, Masterclass number 2, we talked about the 3 fundamental concepts of MED programming, and that is simplicity over complexity, intensity over volume. In other words, the weight on the bar matters. And number 3, economy of training. So after laying down the theoretical framework for minimum effective dose programming, Matt then walked us through some practical examples of walking from the end of linear progression, novice linear progression, to an HLM or Texas Method style training program using minimum effective dose changes. So in today's episode, Matt is going to continue those practical examples, and we're now going to walk from an HLM model to a 4-day split. Talk about why we would do that, what the advantages are, and the immense amount of freedom that the 4-day split model opens up for us. So as always, you'll hear my voice pop in from time to time to give you a little context of the conversation because it has been edited down from its original length quite a bit. And I'll also jump in for the coaches to repeat some of their questions and to summarize some of the great points that they made. It was a good discussion today. I hope you enjoy it. This is Masterclass number 3.
What we're going to talk about tonight is moving from that weekly 3-day-a-week program, whether that's a Texas Method type program or a heavy, light, medium, something like that, transitioning to a 4-day split and the freedom that the 4-day split gives us. All right, so now we get to the fun part of programming. Okay, so now you're at a point with your example that everyone is doing a 3-day-a-week, full day, full body split that looks like heavy, light, medium. And I also want to make sure, does everyone understand when I say that heavy, light, medium, and Texas Method are the same program, what I mean by that? So first off, let's start with what does HLM stand for? Because there's actually 2 things it could potentially stand for, and both are correct. What is HLM? What is the H?
So H can stand for heavy, as in high intensity, but it can also stand for high stress, which may or may not be maximum intensity.
So H in the HLM can stand for heavy, but it can also stand for what? High stress. And is heavy always high stress? No, it's not always high stress. It's not. Just be logical for a second. All right, stay with me. I promise this will make sense if you're like, I have no idea what the fuck he's talking about right now. All right, so HLM can be heavy, light, medium. Those are intensity words. Those are sort of quantifications of intensity. On heavy, light, medium, you have a heavy day, you have a light day, and you have a medium day, meaning it's not really heavy, it's not really light. But it doesn't really identify the stress level. So the other way to say HLM is high stress, low stress, and medium. Now, this is important. I hadn't even thought about talking about this on this class. If HLM is heavy, light, medium, what is the heavy day?
Heavy day is about PRs.
Yeah, it's the intensity day. It is the day that is the heaviest bar weight day. Now, heavy, light, medium. Heavy is the heaviest day. That's often Friday. Doesn't have to be. Light is the lightest day. That's almost always Wednesday or whatever, the middle of the week. Medium is the volume day because we're talking about a magnitude of intensity. This is super important to get. Now, if we look at it with the other terms, and instead of heavy, light, medium, it's high stress, low stress, medium stress. What day is the high stress? Is it the heavy day?
A few of the coaches here said maybe.
So you're right, but most of the time it's the volume day. If you have done this on your own, if you've done 5 sets of 5 on squats, and on another day of the week, you've done 1 set of 5 on squats, and that 1 set of 5 on squats was brutally heavy, which one is still more stressful? It's the 5 sets of 5. Now this creates a lot of confusion with HLM. It's actually why I don't tend to call my programs HLM. I tend to call them Texas, even though they might look exactly like HLM, because I don't want there to be confusion. Everybody knows that Texas method is a volume day on Monday, a light day on Wednesday, and a heavy day on Friday. But if we're talking heavy, light, medium, heavy is the intensity day, which is Friday. And if we're talking about high stress, high, low, medium, the high stress day is Monday. So the H day could be Friday or Monday. It depends on which way you're looking. You have to identify, are we talking about heavy or we're talking about high stress? Because for almost everybody, 5 sets of 5 is going to be more stress than 1 set of 5. Now, for everybody, the Wednesday day is the light stress day, the low stress day, or the lightweight day. Right? That's the easy one. But identifying which one is more stressful is important. And it's going to become even more important as we get into the 4-day split and understand the relationship between the exercises in the layout of a 4-day split that are intensity exercises for the day and volume exercises for the day, and what we're trying to accomplish there. Heavy, light, medium, and high, low, medium is the same program, but the one that is high or heavy and the one that is medium flip-flop. The heavy day is the intensity day. The medium day is the volume day. If it's a high stress day, it's the volume day, and the medium stress day is the intensity day. Very important to understand. Heavy, light, medium, Texas method, old man Texas method. So all of those things are the same. So that's why I call it the same program. I'm talking about the theory behind the program. It's a theory class, right? That's what this class is. Like, you have to do the practicals, but I have to provide the theory so that you understand I'm going to help provide the whys. Then you tell me the hows, and I know, okay, they got the why. It's the point of the class, right? The best math teachers we ever had in school, if you ever think back of your best math teachers, that's what they did. The worst math teachers taught you the song to memorize the quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I don't know what the fuck that means. I just know that that's a quadratic formula, right? I want somebody to teach me what that is. So that's what we're doing here. It was great, right? It was a little flat, but otherwise fine. Okay, you guys ready to talk 4-day split? Now, let's start with bird's eye view as high as you can possibly go on the macro bird's eye view, looking at an HLM type program to a 4-day split. So I don't want to talk about specific practical things yet. I want to talk about big picture theory stuff. What occurs when the minimum effective dose change you make goes from a 3-day a week full body program, HLM style, to a 4-day a week split? What is going on? Go.
So there were a few different answers here. One coach pointed out that In the 4-day split, you're going from 3 squat days a week to 2 squat days a week. Another coach pointed out that at the same time, you're adding a pressing day per week because you're going to do 4 pressing movements as opposed to 3. And then another coach pointed out that with the 4-day split, essentially what you're doing is you're giving an intensity day and a volume day for every lift. So the squat will follow an intensity volume split. So will the press, bench press, deadlift. And a lot of times that is set up as an upper body day, followed by a lower body day, or vice versa. But you can really spread those out however you like throughout the week. There's a lot of flexibility there, but for every lift, there's an intensity day and a volume day.
But I still think that we're at like 10,000 feet and I want to go to 30,000 feet. Think about the frequency. Let's talk about not specific frequency, the relationship of the frequency here. This is the first major frequency change that we're making in MED programming. What are we doing on a macro level, not on a specific level? And don't say the word press or squat or deadlift or bench press. What is going on with the frequency?
So in the 4-day split, you're increasing the amount of recovery in the SRA cycle. And the reason for that is that upper body lifts are not as stressful as lower body lifts, especially for a lifter at this level of advancement who's probably pretty dang strong in absolute terms. So as a result, you decrease the frequency of the lower body work because those lifts are more stressful, while at the same time you increase the frequency of the upper body work because those lifts are not as stressful. The absolute weight on the bar is less for those lifts, so they generate less systemic stress compared to the lower body lifts.
You're trading off, you're reducing frequency, and what I would argue at this point is unnecessary frequency in the squat and the deadlift, and replacing it with needed frequency in the bench press and press. Now, all sorts of stuff come after that, like all sorts of like trickle down effects happen. But the primary thing that occurs is that we're training the squat and the deadlift or variants thereof 3 times a week. And we're training the upper body movements 1.5 times per week before we go to the 4-day split. And when we go to the 4-day split, it all evens out. We trade off the frequency on the squat and the deadlift of 3 times a week, and we add the frequency in the bench press and press to bring it up from 1.5 times a week to 2. And now we're at 2 on everything. And that opens up a tremendous amount of freedom in our potential programming with our clients. All the holes are filled in a 3-day program that's full body. As a matter of fact, I'll give you a specific example. So I had Nikki Sims. I coached Nikki Sims. I coached her for a while. And before she did her last meet, I had her on a 4-day split. And she went 9 for 9, hit massive PRs. It was great. Wasn't me, it was her. And then when most of you guys that follow Nikki Sims know, she just went to Europe. She went to England, France, and saw Omaha Beach and, went to Normandy, all that fun stuff. And I had her training just 2 to 3 times a week when she was there. So she was doing full body workouts because she knew she was traveling so much, she wouldn't get as much frequency in. And when she came back home, she was like, hey, I really want to go back to 3-day-a-week programming instead of 4. So 4 is 1 day too much for me. I'm doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm doing this stuff. So we had to talk about it, and we decided like 3 days is what's right for her right now. But I'm telling you, it's like I'm programming with one hand tied behind my back because I'm like, Nikki, I've got you doing 3 lifts a day, 3 days a week, and we're 1 lift short because I'm short of press. So do you want to do 4 lifts on one of those days to get that extra press in? So that's what we're talking through, right? Do you want to do powerlifting next and do 2 bench presses a week and 1 press? Do you want to do strength lifting next and do 2 presses and 1 bench? 4-day split fixes all of those problems because you get to go to 2, you do 2 squats a week, 2 deadlifts a week, 2 bench presses a week, and 2 presses a week. And we'll talk about volume and intensity here in a minute. it also opens up, because of the insane increase in efficiency, in economy, it gives us the opportunity to start adding supplemental and accessory work quickly, efficiently at the end of those first two exercises. So they do, squat and deadlift, and then some accessory if they need to or want to, or bench press and press, or press and bench press, and some accessory work. And so it gives us the opportunity to do that as well. So the freedom you have as a coach, really, I like keeping people walking down the straight and narrow MED path as long as I can. But once I'm making MED changes after LP, like I've made 2 or 3 post LP changes. If the client comes to me and says, I want to go to a 4-day split, they're going that day. Because of the freedom it gives you as a coach. Now, it doesn't mean it's optimal again, right? I still think you milk it, get your HLM in, do that Texas method HLM type variant. It works great. Run it as long as you can. We're talking about long-term athletic development of the lifter. I want to keep them for a decade, not for 6 months. But as soon as that person post LP says, I want to go to a 4-day split, they're going to a 4-day split, because of the freedom it gives everyone, not just the coach, but the client as well. You're free from the bondage of full body lifting, which for most people sucks. So that's the overview. The overview is we're trading off frequency we probably no longer need to gain frequency that we desperately need. We lose the frequency on the squat and the deadlift to pick up the frequency on the bench press and press. And why does that matter? Well, because I would argue at the point that we get rid of it, if we did this right, the squat and the deadlift are heavy enough and have enough volume that a light day is unnecessary. But for bench press and press, all along the entire process of this, which might be 8 months, 10 months, 12 months, 15 months, they've continued to just peter along at 1.5 times per week. And now I have an opportunity to give them 2 times per week. And the frequency increase on the upper body lifts, while the decrease in frequency in the lower body lifts is the only MED change that needs to be made to probably continue driving both. Because the high frequency of the lower body lifts is probably causing too much fatigue, and the too little frequency of the upper body lifts is not causing enough fatigue to drive the adaptation. And I get to fix both of those by moving from a 3-day split to a 4-day split. Right?
So there's a question here. Do you think the bench press or press would benefit from even more frequency?
Eventually, yes. Absolutely. But if I'm doing them 1.5 times per week and frequency needs to increase, and I increase them from 1.5 times per week each to 2 times per week, then I've taken a minimum effective dose step in the right direction. And at some point, I would argue that most people need to actually train once they become competitive, and they're either a competitive power lifter or they're a competitive strength lifter, and that changes things because that means they're going to prioritize either the bench press over the press or the press over the bench press, then I would actually add a 3rd session in on the priority lift. So for my power lifters, most of my power lifters who are advanced, and that I'm getting ahead of myself by about 3 weeks, that gets into sort of DUP. For my power lifters, they're going to bench press or do some sort of bench press variant 3 times a week. And they're going to do a press or press variant 2 times a week. And for my strength lifters, it'll be the other way around. They would press about 3 times a week, and they would bench press or do the variants 2 times a week. It's very hard to do 6 times a week. I've tested it. It's hard. 5 seems to be about the max amount of pressing you can do. Because if you do 5 presses per week on a 4-day split, then that means that there's you're doing 2 presses on Tuesday and 2 presses on Friday, and now you got to do some press on the lower body day, which is difficult. But again, necessary if you're 32 years old and healthy and well-trained and strong and advanced and haven't missed training. So we'll get there in a few weeks. So let's talk about the 4-day split in its most simple form. At the point that you get to the 4-day split from an HLM type program like Texas Method or actual HLM, all of the lifts have a heavy day or a high or a medium stress day or a volume day / high stress day, right? And all we're doing is getting rid of the light days for the squat and deadlift and replacing them with moderate to heavy bench presses and presses so that the systemic stress goes up, but the recovery for the upper and lower body amount of time also goes up. It's the only time that you get to increase stress and increase recovery at the same time is when you go from a 3-day split to a 4-day split. Because the total stress across the week can go up, but I can be really tired from Monday's squat and deadlift workout and still come in and hit PRs on the bench press and the press on Tuesday because the muscles were relatively unaffected. I'm still tired, my back still hurts, sore, my adductors are sore, my butt's sore from the squats, but I can come in and press and bench press. And then I take that Wednesday completely off, rest, eat good food, get good sleep, and come back on Thursday and do another lower body workout. And then come in on Friday and do an upper body workout, or maybe take Friday off and come in on Saturday and do an upper body workout. Again, you got lots of freedom there. So in a 4-day split, I have 2 upper body days, 2 lower body days, and 3 rest days. And they are rest. I'm not doing anything on those days. I don't need to when I go to a 4-day split because if I need to add accessory movements or prowler conditioning, I'm going to do them on the workout days at the end of the workout, not on the rest days. I'm going to rest on the rest days because I need to recover.
Another question here. What are some red flags or some indicators that a client needs to move to a 4-day split, other than them actually asking to be moved to a 4-day split? Is there any other way to know that it's an appropriate time to make the switch?
Yeah, it's a great question. How do you know if the client doesn't ask to move them to a 4-day split? Why do you move them to a 4-day split?
Someone answered when the client starts stalling on the upper body lifts.
Consistent stalls on the upper body lifts is what will happen first. And if you don't change quick enough, what will happen is stalls on both the volume and intensity day on the lower body lifts as well. And that's a guaranteed time to switch. But if the upper body if the lower body is trucking along okay, and the upper body, you're like, I just can't make progress. I can't make progress. The frequency's too low. You need to move into a 4-day split. So our experience is in general that the thing that's going to die first is the press and the bench press. One or the other, right? Depends on the client. There's a little less muscle mass used in the press. Everybody knows you press a little less weight than you do bench press, right? But sometimes it depends on the anthropometry of the lifter, how much the lifter's trained the previous lift, some of those things, right? Actually, the more advanced the lifter is at something like a bench press, the bench press often will die first because they're more advanced from the very beginning. Like I'll have clients who are doing 275 for sets across on the bench press and 135 for sets across on the press. And you're like, man, that's a massive difference. And so they can keep making progress on the press because they are truly a novice on the press, but they are late intermediate on the bench press. Now, what do you do if your client is a late intermediate on the bench press? See, this is also real important. Like you're not able to just go like, hey, You're intermediate now, or hey, you're advanced now on all 4 lifts. They all happen at different time periods. So yeah, that's the first thing, is this consistent missing of reps, resets on the upper body movements. And it's because it's not enough stress. It's not enough work. And that's a hard thing for a coach to grasp, because if they're missing reps, your first thing you think is like, man, I'm beating them to death. Nope. Not enough. Not enough. And it's maybe both, right? Because they're still getting upper body work in. So the crazy thing about that 3-day split is they're getting upper body work in 3 days a week. But the frequency of those lifts are 1.5 times per week. And so the stress to their upper body is 3 times a week, is on a systemic level. But the bench press is only getting trained every other workout, and the press is only getting trained every other workout. So if you move into the 4-day split, you fix both those things. Now you give them time to recover between workouts, and you train them both on the same workout. Now, here's what I'm going to do. What is the effect of, you've always been, from the very beginning, you've been squatting and deadlifting on the same day. The thing I want to come back and talk about is, what's the effect of going from bench press to press, bench press to press on day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, to now I'm going to bench press and press on the same day. And I'm going to press and bench press on the same day. What is the new effect that the client has to experience? Think about your own experience and what that felt like when you moved to that 4-day split. And okay, now I'm doing both of the presses on the same day. I've always been doing the squat and deadlift on the same day. Now what's it look like for the bench press and press? Cool. So what happens with the press and the bench press when you start doing them on the same day? What do you have to prepare your clients for?
So when you go to benching and pressing in the same workout, you have to be ready for the fact that the first thing you do is going to impact your performance on the second thing you do. So if you bench heavy and then you have to do some volume presses, you're going to be fatigued going into the presses.
Yeah, so does that matter?
Some of the coaches argued, yes, it does matter, because you're going to have to take into account that interference effect and most likely do the second movement at a lighter weight than you would have done it had you only been doing that movement. So in other words, if you benched first and then you did presses, the presses are probably going to be a little bit lighter than they would have been if you were only pressing on that day. And consequently, you also have to decide, which lift am I going to do first? If this is an intensity volume split, do I do the intensity lift first always? Or do I do the volume lift first? Or do I flip-flop?
In general, if you're training for general strength and you get to the 4-day split, the intensity lift must come first. Because what is the stress for the intensity lift? What gives us the quantifiable metric that we are making progress on the intensity lift? The weight on the bar. The weight on the bar has to go up every single time for the intensity lift. What is the stressor on the volume lift?
The stressor on the volume lift is tonnage, or the number of reps times the weight on the bar.
3 principles. Number 1, simplicity. Right? Number 2, intensity. Number 3, economy. Here's the deal. When we move to a 4-day split, that gives us the opportunity to have 4 workouts. And all 4 workouts will look for the rest of your life basically like this. There will be a day one. It doesn't necessarily have to be day 1, but there will be a day that is squat intensity followed by deadlift volume. There's a day that is press intensity followed by bench press volume. There's a day that is deadlift intensity followed by squat volume. Everybody does this one wrong. You have to deadlift first on deadlift intensity day and squat volume second. Now, are there outlier reasons to do it otherwise? Yes, there always are. There always are reasons. If somebody's deadlift is so far beyond their squat and their squat is the lagging lift, I'm probably going to have them squat first anyway. Right? But in general, the intensity exercise comes first. And then there's the bench press intensity day, which comes before the press volume. Now, the theory behind this is important to understand why. The theory tells you why. What must go up on the intensity lift? Weight on the bar, magnitude, actual, no shit, weight on the bar. What has to go up on the volume day? That one's kind of a trick question. Like it's time under tension, it's volume, it's tonnage, it's all those things. Will tonnage go up forever? No. Is it an extremely useful metric for the volume lift? Yeah, it's extremely useful. But it's not the thing that always has to go up. But the point here is that I'm trying to do intensity on intensity lift, and I'm trying to do volume, hypertrophy, time under tension, etc. on the volume lift, which means I can be fatigued on the volume lift. It's okay. It's okay when you go press first for intensity and then bench press for volume, and your bench press is fatigued from the intensity of the press. It doesn't matter because the intensity has to go up on the press. But the fatigue, the micro trauma to the sarcomeres, to the actin and myosin, to the sliding filaments of the contractile tissue of the muscle, those things are important for the volume work. It's physiological there. And if there is some fatigue there, it's okay. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to do 5 sets of 5 on squats and then try to hit a new 1 rep or 3 rep or 5 rep max on the deadlift. That's dumb. We're not going to do that. It's not the goal of the day, right? So I would argue that we start to define what is the primary thing that is the stressor. And when volume is the stressor on the volume lift, we make sure that the volume continues to go up or the tonnage continues to go up over time. And when intensity is the primary driver of stress on the intensity day, then the intensity can go up. And that comes back to Scott's question earlier tonight, which is, how do you know when intensity increase at the cost of volume is appropriate? When intensity is the primary driver of stress for that lift on that day, I don't care if the volume has to reduce because it's not the goal of that lift that day. It's weight on the bar on that lift that day. And there's going to be another day that you're going to do that same lift where the weight on the bar is not the goal. The volume is the goal. The tonnage is the goal. The work is the goal. The stress is the goal. All of those things. And what moving to a 4-day split does, before I even get into supplemental lifts, before I even get into like changing the sets and rep schemes to any kind of weird stuff, is I can just flat out have an intensity movement, lower body, followed by a volume movement, lower body, the other one, right? Intensity squat followed by volume deadlift. And on the upper body days, the same thing. And then I've only done 2 movements instead of 3. So now in the time it would have taken me to do that third lift, I can probably get a whole bunch of accessory work in, right? Like what? Like upper body's easy. What type of accessory work would be acceptable for those upper body days after the press and the bench press, or the bench press and the press?
One answer was close grip bench press or a lying triceps extension.
Okay, so I would say I would go to an LTE before a close grip bench, and here's why. An LTE is very different from a close grip bench press. It would be hard to do a press intensity followed by a bench press volume followed by a close grip bench press, because close grip bench press and normal bench press are too close. And so a lying triceps extension or a rolling dumbbell extension or something like that for triceps, or dips, if your shoulders can handle it, if you're young, your shoulders can handle it, all of those are acceptable. I would typically start with a back movement on the upper body day. I would do chins or barbell rows, or for older populations, I might do lat pull downs. Those are probably the first 3 type things I would do. And then I would probably do a tricep movement second. And if the person had plenty of time, was young, virile, potent, etc., I might have them do some curls. They're going to do curls anyway, whether you ask them to. If they're a dude, they're going to do curls anyway, and they're just not going to tell you they did them. So let's just do them, right? And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll do the back movement on its own, and I'll superset the sort of tricep movement and the bicep movement. And all of that, like the rows or chins or pull downs and the tricep work and bicep work together, all take about 15 minutes total from start to finish. So you like press intensity for 1 set of 5 or a top set of 3 and a couple back offs. And then you do like 4 sets of 5 or 5 sets of 5 on bench press, and that takes a while. And then you go like 15 minutes, hard and fast, accessory movements. Extra work capacity, continue to fatigue the muscles we're trying to grow. It's a volume thing. It's a hypertrophy thing. Go, go, go. Get out of the gym. Lower body's a little harder. Squat and deadlift. A lot of times I won't program anything. Get out. It's fine. You squatted heavy. You deadlifted for volume. Or you deadlifted heavy. You squatted for volume. You can get out of the gym. What is another thing that you might do after those if you added something after the squat and the deadlift?
One answer was you could push the prowler.
Prowler is my favorite. Glute ham raise, echo bite. So start adding in some accessory or some conditioning. If the person's overweight, if the person's just needs some conditioning, they're generally unhealthy. They have high blood pressure. Some of those things that we can't say exercise absolutely fixes, but we know from experience that it certainly doesn't hurt. Those are all things that work real well. So that's how we get to the 4-day split. So we make that change, and now we've got this beautiful layout of an intensity movement and a volume movement and some time for some accessories. And that sets us up. When that starts to fail, we're not going to get there yet. What sort of amazing opportunities does it open up for us moving forward? We haven't gotten into supplemental lifts yet, right? We haven't gotten into sort of like waves. We haven't gotten into a 2-week program or 3-week program or 4-week program. All of those things become possibilities. We haven't gotten into block training, which is still 4-day split, like block/conjugate training is a 4-day split. All those things are, well, I can't do any of those things very well in the 3-day full body split. And the 3-day full body split is still exactly right. Right? For as long as it can be. So, all right, what do you got for me?
So someone asked, if we go back to the 1x5, 5x5 intensity volume split, what is driving strength adaptation in that case? Is it the 5x5 or is it the 1x5? And is the 5x5 the thing that's supporting the 1x5 intensity set?
No, I don't know. Like, I've heard it said that way a lot. I think you get into a dangerous piece there when you start to say that, because you say, well, like, obviously the 5x5, no one would argue that the 5x5 is clearly the thing that's the most stressful thing that happens that week.
Yep.
But if we're not careful and we swing the pendulum too far that direction, then people say that the 5x5 is the stress and the light day is the recovery and the heavy day is the adaptation. And I think that's just not accurate, because I think the heavy day is clearly still a stress. Actually, the light day is still a stress.
Mm-hmm.
But the heavy day is definitely a stress. And so we know that. We know that we can continue, that there are times in training we can just train heavy and make progress, because the just heavy is still stressful enough to drive a strength adaptation. So anybody who's ever done like a no shit bone on bone grinder, 1 set of 5, and then walked out of the gym knows it can be enough of a stressor to drive an adaptation. So, but yes, the 5x5, so you're not wrong. It's just the 5x5 is clearly the bigger stressor, but the 1x5 is still something that will disrupt homeostasis and drive an adaptation. So both, which is why I would argue that 5x5 on Monday and 1x5 on Friday are more stressful than 3x5 on each day. And remember that the weight has gone up significantly in both, right? So if you just look at the volume, if you just say it's 6 sets of 5 in both weeks, then you go, well, it's the same stress. It's not the same stress because you were doing 3 sets of 5 at 3:15 on Monday, and you're doing 3 sets of 5 at 3:20 on Thursday or Friday or whatever. And now you're doing 5x5 at 3:25, and you're doing 1x5 at 3:75. It's clearly more stressful. Is the first week or two more stressful? No, it's a change in program. There's a slight deload. There's a little ramp up period that happens. Happens for everybody. You can't take what people are doing for their 3 sets of 5, increase 5 pounds and go to 5 sets of 5. We all know that. Don't turn in an assignment next week that does that. Like, we know you can't do that. There has to be a little bit of a reset. How much? I don't know. There isn't an answer. It depends on the demographic, right? In fact, it's often the opposite of what you think it would be. If it's a 60-year-old woman, the amount of deload you have to make going from 3 sets of 5 to 5 sets of 5 is very low. If it's a guy who's squatting 450 for 3 sets of 5, and that's hard, and you move him to 5 sets of 5, you can't go to 440. It'll kill him. You're going to have to go from 450 for 3 sets of 5 to probably 420 for 5 sets of 5, 415, 410, and working back up. So there will be a minor deload in stress. There will be a little, and that's fine because we want that that fatigue to dissipate. But after a few weeks, the stress is clearly higher, even though we're still doing 6 sets of 5 collectively in a week-long macro cycle on the lift, right? Now I'm doing 5 sets of 5 at a weight that's 20 pounds heavier than I was doing 3 sets of 5 at. And I'm doing my 1 set of 5 at a weight that's 40 pounds heavier or 45 pounds heavier than the weight I was doing for 3 sets of 5. So again, the tonnage across the board, which is just one of the metrics, increases dramatically. And what's more important to understand is that the primary stressor, we identify that the primary stressor is if the weight keeps going up on the bar on the intensity day, on Friday or whatever the intensity day is. And if the volume slash tonnage slash work keeps going up on the volume day, that's the right stressor. That's the goal of the 4-day split. And then it opens up all sorts of fun stuff to do from there as a coach. Okay, that's all I got for you tonight. What questions do you have? And we'll wrap her up.
Charity made a great point that when you're talking about moving to a 4-day split, it's a pretty big change, and you really have to know your client. You have to know the lifter. The example that Matt is laying out assumes a true athlete, someone who's very consistent with their training, that doesn't miss training sessions, that has a mindset that's oriented towards doing hard stuff, but that may not represent a general population client. They may not be you. That may not be the lifter that you're coaching. And so what Charity does with some of her older lifters in particular is she gradually introduces them to, let's say, a 5x5 volume day. Instead of dumping it right on them with a little bit of a deload, as Matt was describing, she'll take the same weight that they have been doing and start adding reps. So 3 sets of 5 can become 3 sets of 6, can become 4 sets of 4, can become 4 sets of 5 and 6, and so on, until you walk up gradually to that 5 sets of 5 volume day. The point is that she tries not to make huge changes that might freak out some of her general population clients or clients that just don't have as much of an athletic mindset. We've talked elsewhere in this podcast about the difference between people who train because they love it and they're motivated to train, and people who train kind of like they're taking medicine. They train because they know it's good for them, not because they necessarily enjoy it. So the point of Charity's comment was really just to know who you're dealing with, understand their mindset and where they're coming from, and be cognizant of how the lifter is going to experience these MED changes that you're giving them.
Yeah, it's a great point. For that 27-year-old kid, moving from 3 sets of 5 to 5 sets of 5, probably fine. For that 65-year-old lady, nope. Make the smallest change. So you know what the end of HLM looks like, and you know the goal we're trying to get to for the 4-day split of the intensity day and the volume day. But you're not going to go, this is the point of this class, you're not going to go from a standard HLM to a standard 4-day split on week 23 to week 24. Doesn't work that way. You're going to make individual steps, a little bit at a time, 3 sets of 5 to 4 sets of 5 to 5 sets of 5. That's a simple way to do it. Or 3 sets of 5 to 4 sets of 5 or 5 sets of 4, like whatever. 6 sets of 4 to 5 sets of 5. Like, depends on who your demographic is, right? The smallest change you can make for the greatest return on investment. What's the smallest change I can make on the volume day to make sure I keep increasing volume and tonnage? Do that. What's the smallest change I can make on the intensity movement to make sure the weight on the bar doesn't just go up this week, but continues to go up for the next several weeks? Like, we can always just like make the weight go up. Hey, just do a single this week. Okay, the weight went up. What are you going to do next week? Right? We want to try to do this on a long-term basis. How do I keep making the weight go up on the intensity movement? And how do I keep making the volume go up, or the tonnage or the work capacity, the work, whatever, on the volume movement for a long time, for years? How do I do that with minimum effective dose steps? All right. So you guys have a good one. I'll talk to you next week. See you guys.
Thanks yet again for listening to another episode of Barbell Logic. I hope you've been enjoying these MED Masterclasses. We've got a few more in the pipe that will tie together basically all of the programming discussions that we've had on this podcast to date into one nice package for you. So in the meantime, if you want to continue the conversation, if you want to continue challenging your brain about training concepts, about all aspects of fitness, health, and lifestyle, go to barbelllogic.com, sign up for the newsletter. It's called the Friday Fives. Drops every Friday in your inbox, and you get lots of cool articles, recipes, discounts on Barbell Logic coaching, and much more. And you can only get that if you sign up for that newsletter. It's not published anywhere else. So go do that. Leave us a review on iTunes while you're at it. And if you have any questions, send them to questions@barbell-logic.com. We will answer those on an upcoming Q&A session. All right, we will talk to you next time.